Story by Corina.
Summer story, and I love summer, my favorite time of the year. Even when it's really, really hot, I still love summer the best of all, because I like to be barefoot, and I like to be outside, and I like the flowers and the sunshine, and if I can find any water, I like that too.
Amen.
Now, I want to ask you a question first. Do you think that God can use anybody or anything to help you when you're in trouble? I think so too. And that's what this story is about. A little boy named Gary and his brother named Stephen. And Gary had something he would never have expected to happen to him, but God helped him. Now, there's a place in Australia, which is an island. An island means there's water all around it. So if there's going to be water all around, that means there's going to be beaches, and you can look for shells, and you can play in the sand. And so it's a wonderful place to go. If you've never been to a beach, I highly recommend it. I love the ocean. There's even been times in my life, even living in Ohio, that I got a craving to go to the ocean, and I went to Florida. That's happened a couple times. For weeks, I wanted to go to the ocean. Well, I got my fill of it for a little while anyways. So, this is about a place in Australia called Monkey Mia. Have you ever heard of a place called Monkey Mia? Mm-hmm. That was part of the reason that my attention was brought to this story. I'd never heard of any place called Monkey Mia. Of course, at first I thought it was going to be about a monkey. No monkeys in this story at all. So, I want to show you a picture first. Now, Monkey Mia is a real place where people go, and what they do there, they go to see dolphins. And they have all kinds of dolphins that people can go and feed and pet them. And these are bottlenose dolphins. Can you take a guess why you think that it's called bottlenose? Got a real long nose, kind of like a bottle. Yep. So they're real friendly, and dolphins are very smart, and they're friendly to people. So that's what this story is about, a place called Monkey Mia, and Stephen and Gary, who go on vacation with their mom and dad to this place called Monkey Mia to have lots of fun. But something is about to happen that they never would have dreamed would happen. So it was wintertime in Australia, but Australia is in a part of the world where it doesn't get real cold during the winter like it does here. So still, a lot of families, they go to the warmer part of the country during their vacations, and Monkey Mia is one of those places. Now, Stephen and Gary are on their way to this wonderful place with their parents. I bet they're really excited riding in the car. If it's very far, sometimes that can get a long time and get kind of boring. But the closer you get, the more excited you get, because you know that the fun is coming. So, they left early on a Sunday morning, and they were planning to be back on Friday so that they would be able to go to church on the Sabbath. Now, Father says to Mother, I have always wanted to visit Monkey Mia. I can hardly wait, said Stephen from the back seat of the car. Did you know that the brain of a bottlenose dolphin is bigger than that of a human? Michael said to the boys in the back of the car. They arrived at their hotel just before the evening meal. 12-year-old Stephen tried to carry the heaviest suitcases, but his father let him help him carry them up the stairs. 10-year-old Gary also helped, and at the dinner table, Michael thanked the Lord for his protection on the 10 hours of a long trip. After the meal, Stephen helped Mom with the dishes, and Gary went onto the balcony to have a look over the ocean. The view there was absolutely beautiful. Suddenly he exclaimed to the others, "Come and have a look. There is something going on down at the beach. There's a whole group of people looking at something." The others quickly joined him on the balcony. "The dolphins have come into the shore for their feeding. Let's all go down and look." And they quickly ran downstairs and joined the crowd on the beach, and there they saw a most wonderful sight. About half a dozen dolphins were frolicking in the water. One man with a basket full of fish was feeding the dolphins. He was obviously a man who knew what he was doing, and the dolphins seemed to know him quite well. For when some of the people came to try to feed them, the dolphins were a bit hesitant and shy. Gary asked the man if he could give it a try, and much to his surprise, he was allowed to, and the dolphins didn't even mind at all. The man who had been feeding the dolphins belonged to the Department of Conservation. He knew quite a lot about dolphins and gave the people who had gathered around him much information. "Did you know," he said, "that the dolphin youngsters have a close bond with their mother? They stay with their mother for quite a long time. You see the little one over there, for instance, and do you know how close it stays to its mother? The mother needs to teach the young ones hunting skills. It also needs to teach the young ones survival skills as well as social skills." After the man from the Department of Conservation had emptied his basket, he left and all the people went back down the beach. Father, Mother, and Stephen slowly walked back to their rooms, but Gary stayed back behind a little while longer, and the rest of the family had not noticed. And even if they did, they would not have thought that he would go away from them. Gary was so fascinated by the dolphins, he could not leave yet, even though the dolphins had disappeared into the distance. He was wondering what they were doing now and if the baby dolphin was all right. And he was thinking about this as he wandered away from the rest of the people and walked towards the rocks at the water's edge. He loved the beach. It was so clean and attractive. The water also seemed so calm and inviting. Tomorrow, he thought, we'll all go swimming. He wandered further and further and enjoyed the peace and quiet so much. As usual, he was in a world of his own. He had not noticed that the sun was going down and that it was slowly getting darker. Therefore, he had walked further than he realized, and it was time for a rest. So he sat down on one of the rocks and just enjoyed the beauty of this place. You think somebody's going to miss him? You think he's going to be able to just sit there for a while and nobody think, well, where's Gary? We left him behind. But he's just sitting there like no one's noticed yet. Then he got up and walked a bit further and further away from where all the activity was. Here the rocks were quite slippery because of all the algae growing on them. It was getting so dark now that he could hardly see where he was putting his feet. It's time to go back to my room, he thought. But maybe he could go just a little further. He was enjoying himself so much. I better not fall in the water, though. Even though he was a good swimmer and had many medals to prove it, he did not feel like getting wet right now. Not yet. Tomorrow we can go for a swim. Next moment, he slipped on the rocks and fell into the water. As he fell, he hit his head on a rock just below the surface. All his swimming medals did not help him now, for he was knocked out, unconscious. Everything was dark before his eyes as he sank to the bottom. It was not so very deep, but it was deep enough to drown in. Now he would just drown there, for nobody was around who had seen him fall into the water. There was nobody who could help him now. But the Lord was watching over him. One of the dolphins Gary had been feeding earlier was still around. The dolphin swam over to Gary. First he nudged him carefully with his sensitive nose, but Gary did not move. Then he shoved him a bit harder, but still no movement. So carefully he lifted him and pushed him onto the surface. At least he was safe now, but he was only safe from the water. The dolphin couldn't do any more for Gary. He was bleeding from a big cut on his head. He lay there on the rocks very still, and he was losing some blood from his cut. Father and Mother, in the meantime, were worried, and they had noticed that they hadn't seen him for a while. They knew Gary was a good swimmer, but it was unusual for him to stay away for so long. He normally didn't do things like that. They were extremely worried. So with a prayer in their heart, they joined the search party. One group went one way and the other group went in the opposite direction. And they searched all over the place with their flashlights because now it was dark. They looked behind every shrub, on the rocks, and on the beach, but they couldn't find Gary. They even came very close to where the dolphin had deposited Gary onto the rocks, but he was hidden from view, so they walked straight past him. They called his name several times, louder and louder, but Gary was unconscious and could not hear them. They walked for a long time already and still had not found him. And Mother and Father had become very worried. They had been so very close to him, but they didn't know it. Stephen had fallen behind a little, and as the group got farther ahead, it became very quiet near the rocks. As the voices sounded further away, it became very still. Where could Gary be, he thought. He was just as anxious as his parents. Then he stood for a moment because he thought he heard a noise. Yes, he did hear something. The sound came from the water's edge. Could that be Gary splashing in the water? As he came closer, he noticed something in the water, and with the help of his flashlight, he noticed a dolphin in the water. And this dolphin was splashing around. He was thrashing around in the water, and he seemed to be quite agitated. Stephen couldn't understand what this was all about, so he called out to his parents and the rest of the search party. First, they did not hear him, for they were too far away already. But he managed to get their attention, and with the help of his flashlight, they all came running. Michael reached him first. "What's the matter, Stephen?" he said. "There's this dolphin in the water," Stephen said, "and he seems to be quite distressed about something." "I don't know. What's the matter with him?" Stephen said. In the meantime, some of the rest of the search party also arrived at that spot. "I think that dolphin is trying to tell us something," someone suggested. So they all came closer, and everyone looked very carefully with their flashlights. Suddenly, Stephen called out, "Here he is! I found him!" And yes, there was Gary on the rocks, all wet, unconscious, and bleeding from the injury to his head. You can understand how thankful Stephen and his parents were that Gary was still alive. They hoped he would be all right now. Stephen, being a fast runner, was then sent to the other search party to tell them the good news that Gary was found. Earlier, the first aid person had already put Gary on his stomach, and he tried to push the water out of his lungs. After a while, Gary opened his eyes to everyone's amazement. "What happened?" Gary asked. "I really don't know. I just went for a walk. And it was dark before I realized I'd walked too far, and I remembered going onto the rocks, and then I must have slipped on the rocks." "You must have hit your head on the rocks," someone suggested. "But how did you end up on the rock?" someone else asked. "Well, you know what I think happened," Michael said. "I think the dolphin noticed and shoved you out of the water onto the rock. Without the help of this dolphin, you would most certainly have drowned. God has been good to you and us." During all the excitement, nobody paid any more notice of the dolphins. The dolphin was still close by. Most of them wanted to stay behind and give a fish to the dolphin. Some of the strong men carried Gary, and when they arrived, they found a doctor waiting for them. He had already been called by the manager of the hotel to make sure that Gary was all right. Gary was fine except for the cut, and Gary and his brother Stephen and mother and father all could agree that God had watched over Gary, and he had been rescued in a most unexpected way. So, do you think that God can use anybody or anything to rescue you? He even used a dolphin, because the dolphins are smart and they're sensitive, and God made the dolphin smart enough to be able to find a way to help him, because the dolphin knew something was wrong. And the dolphins were used to people being around, so he wasn't afraid. And he helped Gary out of the water, onto the rocks, until someone found him. That's how good that God is. Even when no one else knows where you are or what's going on, God knows and can send someone or something, even an animal, to help you. You have been wonderfully quiet. Thank you.